So if he's not able to control it, he may fall, or like the trolley may go like from his hand. So these kinds of things happen. So when he's repeating or getting used to that ramp up and down, he will be able to control it. So that's what they mean by an adaptation to the environment. Okay. This brings something called as the internal representation. So this is what actually every time a person is repeating the same activity, like once he might make many errors, second time or third time he's reaching on the same place where he has to go up the ramp and suddenly coming down, he will be like able to adjust accordingly to it. That is because of the internal representation. Okay. So this is what another and this is what that inverse model they are telling. Like every time we are not waiting for the sensory or proprioceptive feedback. Okay, when it happens, we can like there is a delay and we may make errors. Okay, so the feed forward model proposes there is something that is like formed. Okay, before we or after we adapt to the movement. That is, we can take another example of faster movements, things like a cricketer using a, like batting. Okay, the ball is coming fast, and the batsman will not have that much time. Okay, to decide what kind of ball is coming and all like with the sensation. So that's what this inverse model we are using. Already that model has been inside, it has been formed due to practice, which is actually helping the person to select what kind of shot has to be used against the kind of balls coming. Hope I'm clear so far. If there is any doubt or like any part I need to explain, I can explain it.
It's clear, sir. We can understand.
Because these terms we are coming across in the studies, I'll be repeating it. Okay, I'll be repeating it again. So the background again, like we go to the study. Okay, in the background it is talking about perturbation. Okay. So that is like how perturbation, we are exposed to perturbation, how we can adapt by changing the dynamics of the movement. Okay. We are pushed or pulled, and then like how we are able to adapt it when we are repeatedly exposed. So this adaptation is achieved by constructing an internal representation of the perturbation. So to form this internal representation, the sensory motor system gathers and integrates sensory inputs, including kinesthetic and tactile information about the external world. I have explained this before, so I'm just telling like what is there in the study. And again, I've already mentioned that kinesthetic information we get from the tension of the muscles and Golgi tendon organs, and tactile information is something we get from the skin. Okay, that is an example can be told as a stretch. Then external load forces I've already mentioned that like when we manipulate any object, the weight of the object and kind of another example we can take if we are manipulating a spring, okay, it exerts recoil. So those kinds of things can be mentioned as external load force. Okay, so in response to these load forces only, we control the manipulation and grip forces. So initially, when we don't know how to manipulate or like things like we may use more forces. One example I can tell is like initially when we all like learned riding a bicycle, we might be using more force over the handle and like we'll be like making it, I mean, we'll be using more force to grip it. Then as the learning progresses, we may like, reduce the amount of force we apply and we will be using only the force necessary to control it. Okay, this is what load force and the force we apply on it, like means. So manipulation forces are the forces and torques that we exert against the hand, object held in the hand, okay, to translate it or rotate it. Grip forces are the forces we use to grasp and prevent the slippage. Okay, so previously we have like studies which use things like even sensations and visual sensation, all those things to find out like how the internal representation is formed from sorry. Previously we have studies which we have where the sensory information are being used to study how the internal representation are formed. Okay. So, but the relative contribution of the kinesthetic and tactile information, which I already told you, how the muscle tension or the stretch is like helping in the formation of force field adaptation or the kind of internal thing on a movement path. Okay, this is poorly understood how the kinesthetic and tactile information is contributing to the adaptation of the movement path. That is not being studied. So this study actually aims to do that. So here, two things are there: the tactile information from the spin stretch and kinesthetic sense, that is from the grip force. They are integrated to form in like how the internal representation is being formed. Okay, so what they are doing is reaching. Okay. I'll explain how this is. Like when it comes to the methodology, you'll be able to know what this is. Then the objective, actually, there is something called as force field. I've already mentioned that we can count the gravity as a force field in which we are there. But here they are using artificial force field with the use of a device. Okay, I'll be telling like what it is. And they are using it to find out how the kinesthetic and tactile information is helping in building the internal representation. That is actually the study is done in the healthy individuals. So before I get into the methods, like if you have any doubts, you can ask me.
Sir, can you once again explain about the internal representations?
This one you're telling, right? This one, right?
Sir, yeah.
Okay. So, like actually, two things. One is the feedback, okay, model. This is the feed-forward model. Okay. What you see in the diagram A is the feedback model. Okay, whenever we attempt anything, or like for example, you can take the example of perturbation. The person is standing and suddenly he's being pushed. Okay, so when the chances are there, like he might fall down. Okay, then we repeat the perturbation. That is like we are exposing the same amount of force on the person and pushing him. What happens is like he will be adapting to it. So first time when, like by the time he realized that he has been pushed, okay, he might have been fall down. And when this is repeated, there is something called as the inverse model, which will predict or like anticipate the, the consequences and prevent falling down. This is called feed-forward model.
Oh, okay. So these two are these two are together called as internal representations.
Yes.
Yeah.
So actually, this is a proposed model, one model. I think like there is another model also which I have come across, but for the like study purpose, I am mentioning this one. Okay. So this is every time.
I would like to add a point.
Yes, sir.
Internal representation is basically there is something which tells about the dynamics or the information about how the peripheral structures may be moving. Right. So that's what is an internal representation. Okay. It's not like a schema, but it tells about, say, for example, your hand is there, right? It tells about how your hand might be moving or might not be moving. It can predict that. That's the internal representation which we are seeing in this particular study. Yeah, Vipin, you can please continue on that.
So this study consists of 45 healthy right-handed volunteers. It has been done on healthy people, not on patients. And each of them were made to do 400 repetitions of a reaching task, okay, by holding a skin stretch device. Okay, I'll come to the details of it. So before we go into the details of the experiment, I just explain what are the components or like what they have used here. So one thing is the participant sat in front of a screen. Okay, this is a virtual screen, what you can see here. And the participant's arm was attached to an air sled wrist support. Okay, that means they are actually reducing the effect of friction on the contact surface. Okay, air sled wrist supporter means it will reduce the friction while moving the form. And the participant performed reaching movement in a virtual reality environment. That is with the screen connected. Okay, using a device that is like, it has 6 degrees of freedom, robotic arm, and it's a haptic device. Okay, this is just name. Okay, it's connected to the screen. So next component of this is the skin stretch device. What you see here in the white color is the skin stretch device. I'll tell you how it works. And what you see here, this arm in black color, this is the haptic device. Okay, the name of it. Okay, haptic device and the skin stretch device. So this skin stretch device is attached to the haptic device, and this measures the. This haptic device applies the force field. I'll tell you what it is. And this records the position, velocity, and forces applied when the participant moves the hand. The participant holds the stretch device, skin stretch device in a precision grip. Okay, that is with the thumb and the index finger. The pad of their index and thumb finger will be in contact with the skin stretch device. And the movement they will be performing is the reaching movement. So here, this is considered actually as a y-axis. For example, just imagine that we have placed a graph paper on the tabletop. So what is the y-axis? Is like through that only they are moving. Okay, and the x-axis is like perpendicular to that. Okay, so like in reality, actually it is different, but here we need to consider like how we are placing the x-axis and y-axis in a piece of paper kept on the table.
So you mean y-axis is moving forward and backward, right?
Yes, sir, forward and backward. There is no upward and downward movement, only that front and back and this.
Okay. And x-axis is moving laterally, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
X-axis both laterally, sir, to both sides. Okay, I'll explain that also. We have in the x-axis, we have positive, that is 1, 2, 3 on one side, and crossing the y-axis, we have negative, -1, -2, -3 like that on the other side. I'll be telling that. So the desired movement means that is like reaching. Okay, that is a desired movement they are telling, and that is in the direction of like frontal, that is the y-axis, and away from the body of the participant, and in the horizontal movement, all the movements taking place is in the horizontal plane only. Okay. The participants' movements were constrained to horizontal plane. So again, I'll like introduce like some parts. The skin stretch device, it consists of something called tactors, two tactors, one on top and one below. Okay, just like how it is coming in contact with the thumb, another tactor is there, which comes in contact with the index finger. Okay. The participants' thumb and index finger were located on the moving tactors. That means when the tactors move, they stretch the skin in a tangential. Tangential. How, like, I'll tell you how it works. Like, I'll switch on my video. Are you able to see me?
Yes.
So can you see my finger?
Yes.
So I'm applying a precision grip on my finger, that is like on the distal interphalangeal joint. Okay, I'm holding it with a moderate grip. Okay, and I'm trying to pull my finger away. Okay, so I can feel the skin is stretching. Okay, if we hold it very tightly, it won't be like we won't be able to sense it. But if we hold it with moderate stretch, we'll be able to see that when we are pulling the finger. Okay, we'll be able to sense it. So this is called tangential. Is that clear?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay. Thank you. So this factor actually applies stretch in the horizontal plane. That is like in the x-axis. And it is actually perpendicular to the y-axis. So it is actually perpendicular to the reaching movement. That's what we need to understand. So another thing is here, actually a force sensor, okay, was attached to it. Okay, this actually measures the grip force. Okay, grip force, how we are using it, like how much grip force we are using. I mean that precision grip, right? How much force is being applied. And a rotational degree of freedom in the connection, okay, that was made. What you see here is like we can think this about an elbow joint. This is the arm part and this comes the forearm part. Suppose if I want to, I am sitting in front of a table and I need to push a glass of water, okay, forward. Like I will be keeping my forearm parallel to the tabletop and I will be pushing the glass. Like you understood, right? What I'm coming to say. So this is what actually they have done by adding a rotational degree of freedom. That means whenever the person is doing a reaching movement, the device is actually in the like parallel to the tabletop. Okay, it is not actually moving up or down. Okay, that is to restrict the movement up and down. They have added this rotational degree. I think that is clear.
Yeah, and so you're telling
Yeah,
that
yes.
if the part was very static, then when we are moving forward, there might be slight up and down movement. But
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
given that there is additional rotational degree, so when we are moving it, we don't move it up and down, and it can go straight.
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes,
So
sir.
that one helps in it. Okay.
So again, the movement of the tactus cause the skin stretch. Okay, that is due to the grip force and the movement of the tactor, which will be resulting in the skin stretch. Now, like once the parts are being clear, like we'll go to the protocol. So I've already mentioned that there were 45 healthy right-handed participants, okay, who volunteered for this test. Actually, they were not aware. They didn't have any idea of what the study is about. Okay, they don't know about the parts or like anything about the machine. They were divided into 3 groups of 15 people. So first one is the control group. Okay. In this control group, they were, I've already mentioned before that, they were asked to perform 400 reaching movements. Okay. When the first group that they were doing the reaching movement, no skin stretch was applied. Okay. That actors didn't move. They are using a word called gain. Okay. That to mention the force of the amount of force applied. Okay. That is G is equal to 0. And there is a second group, that is the experimental group 1. They have applied skin stretch with the same direction of the force field. I'll tell what is force field. Okay. And third group, the experimental group, that is the second experimental group, they got skin stretch in the opposite direction of the force field. So, if you can see this picture, the gray color, okay, arrows are there pointing towards the right in every diagram. Okay, that is the direction of the force field. Actually, this haptic device, which I have already told, that will be applying the force towards the right side. That is the force field. The haptic device applies the force. So these participants were made to perform 400 reaching trials, that is 10 centimeters. And when they are doing a reaching movement, this is what they see on the screen. Actually, they have a yellow cursor. Okay. Here you can see my cursor. And from this white circle, they have to point towards the green circle. So you can see the direction. This is moving towards the y-axis. Okay. So this experiment of 400 trials divided into 3. Okay. Initial 100 trials, that is the baseline. Okay, they named it as baseline, in which no perturbation was given. Then second, that is from the 101, okay, till 300, that is 200 trials. They called it as adaptation, and there was perturbation with or without skin stretch. That is like in the group 1, they didn't apply any skin stretch. Okay, I've already mentioned that in the group 1, they didn't apply any skin stretch. So even in the adaptation, the control group was not given any skin stretch, but the experimental groups were given skin stretch in the middle 200 trials. And in the final 100 trials, that they named it as washout, where no perturbation, that is like sudden removal of the perturbation was given. That is when, like, I've given an example, like in the starting, that a person is pushing a cart full of groceries. Okay, when he reaches the top of the ramp and suddenly he has to come down, the same feeling they'll be getting. Okay, the force field, what they are applying, it is suddenly full. So this is what the diagrammatic representation. Okay, so the people will be moving the cursor from white circle to the green circle. Okay. What in the second group, what you can see is G is 100. Okay, and the third group G is minus 100. So I have told in the x-axis, this skin stretch is actually given in the positive side. That is like this, what gray arrow you see is the force field. And in the third group, the red color is minus 100. Okay, G is minus 100. That is the skin stretch is given in the opposite direction of the force field. Hope it's clear actually. This is clear. Can I proceed?
I am. Anyone, if you have a doubt at this point of time about the experimental setup or how the experiment was done, you can, if you have any logical thing which you're not able to understand or any particular part you're not able to understand, please ask it at this point of time. You should be able to visualize the whole experiment when this is being done. That's what is expected. Okay, there seems to be no questions. I'll just, Vipin, can I summarize a little bit about this?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Like, do I need to change the slide before?
No, you can just keep it like this, right? So I'll just do that. So basically what was happening is that white color device is there, no? That they are holding, and they will have to move it forward. So that's what is given in the white circle and the green circle. They need to move it forward. When they are moving it forward, there will be a constant force which will be given in the lateral direction, especially towards the right side, right? You can see that in the picture, there is a direction of the force field in the x-axis. And that is mentioned as a gray arrows in all the three things. Okay, right? So now there are all the three groups will have to do the same thing, and they'll be doing it continuously for 400 times. Now, as they are doing it, all right, what happens is you saw the what happens is the Raptor which was there, right? That is the red color button which was there, that can move either on the right side or on the left side. Okay, so in the second group, what happened was, as they were moving forward, the Raptors also moved in the same direction, right? Stretching the skin in the same direction. The last group, as the force was applied in the force field was applied towards the right side, the red color device which was there under the thumb and the index finger, that was moved onto the left side. So producing, so it's like on the skin, on one side your force field is pulling on and you're stretching it on the other side. So these were the three different groups of subjects who were there. Okay, right. So that's experiment, and these are the three groups, and they were repeating this for around 400 times. And you can see the gray arrows. During the first 100 trials, there was no lateral force applied towards the right side. And then during the middle 200 trials, actually it was the force field was applied. And in the last one, the force field was not applied. Okay, right? And primarily what they were trying to calculate is what is the path of movement. Normally when we are going forward, it should be a straight line, right? So when they applied suddenly the force onto the lateral side, how did the movement differ, right? And what was happening to the grip force? That's what they were trying to look into. Right? So yeah, so that's yeah.
So may I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So basically the first thing was in one of the previous slides, it was mentioned about the degrees of freedom. So I was a bit confused whether it is allowing the degrees of freedom, as in will there be, like he sir gave an example of like an elbow joint, like a flexion extension. So will it, after the person tries to do the virtual movement, will that actually replicate something like sort of a flexion of the elbow if the person is moving it forward? Or is it that it is there to restrict an actual physical movement in the device, and only on the pressure sensor, that the sensor is checking the force field, so that will just give a virtual movement but not any actual physical movement? Is that what it was?
Vipin, shall I answer that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right. So actually the movement is a real movement. It's not a virtual movement. The screen showed the movement.
Okay.
Okay, right?
All right.
Vipin, am I right, Vipin?
Yes, sir. Actually, that is the target what they see on the screen. But the moment, like we are mainly concerned about the physical aspects because whatever the forces, everything will be getting, it will be encoded, and we are mainly concerned about the activities, what is happening in our body. Okay, we are not much bothered about what is virtually happening.
All right, so that's the movement we are really doing, and on the screen virtually you can see the movement. So that's what is happening on the screen, right? And that degrees of freedom is not related to body; it is related to that particular device. If the
Exactly, sir. So that degrees of freedom, as in if the actual physical movement is happening on the white device that we can see, then that means it would have to allow it to bend at that joint, whatever we can see, so that it moves forward, right?
no, it's not like that. The movement will be made forward and backward. Okay, right? But what is
Okay.
happening is if that it's actually a joint. If that joint is not there, then what happens is as I keep moving, right? It's not a straight path forward. It's just it's slightly, let's have it as slightly slanted. I'm moving. Then what will happen is if that is restricting, then that device will be controlling my movement. But if it is going to permit a little bit of laxity in the upward and downward direction, then I can perform my movement easily, right?
All right. Yeah, that answers my query actually. That it is there to allow the movement rather
Yeah,
than to
allow
restrict
the
it.
movement as we want and
All
not
right. All right.
that
Okay.
needn't control them. That's it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sir,
Yeah,
I had a
yeah.
question. So that you said that there was a rotational axis that is available. So that is for the hand to allow supination, pronation, if any, while moving front and back, right? Not up and down.
No, it's a weapon you can.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, like when we are moving it, we need to make sure that this is in the horizontal plane. That's why, like when this part, actually this can be like
If you can just enlarge on the screen and see it, it gives it very clearly. It is not pronation supination. It is up and down.
If you look this as elbow joint, it will be flexion and extension.
Yeah, if you look that at as elbow joint, it will be flexion extension.
From a sagittal plane.
Yeah, upward and downward, not a
Yes, not a rotational.
yeah, not a
so
supination pronation.
actually this can move up and down, but when we move it this way, this arm when it moves, actually this component has been added to make sure that it is staying in the horizontal plane.
Yes, that's right. I understand.
That's what the example I have told. Suppose we are keeping the elbow bend and we are pushing a glass of water on the tabletop to the front. Okay, what will happen is that our elbow will be moving and our forearm will be staying parallel to the tabletop. Are you able to understand that? Suppose we are pushing a glass of water to front. Okay, someone is sitting on opposite to the table in front. We are pushing a glass of water in front. And just imagine that the elbow is extending and the forearm is kept parallel to the tabletop. So the idea is that my forearm will be always in the frontal plane. Sorry, horizontal plane. Sorry. Okay. I mean, it's moving actually in the horizontal plane. That clears, or like it's confusing.
It's clear.
No, sir, got it.
Got it.
Yeah. Jebaston, is it clear, Jebaston?
Sir, I am trying to make sense of it. Like I'll try to demonstrate. Like I don't know if I'll just switch on my video. Yeah, can you? So this is the that white color thing. This has to be horizontal to the floor. It cannot move this way. And this is that arm. If we take this as an arm, so when we are trying to reach from point that white to gray, so the person would go from this side to that side. They might deviate. So when they are deviating, this angle, it allows to slightly bend from here and there while reaching. So that is that rotational degree.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Actually, like you should move it only in one direction.
Yeah, so the person might like go to one side, but this stays parallel to the floor, but this will allow slight like moving over here. So this will be that rotational degree of freedom.
Just a second.
No, Javasan, that's not the. It's not on the lateral direction. What you're saying is right, but it's not on the lateral.
It's anteroposterior.
Yeah, anteroposterior actually. Like, can I show like this? Okay, this is what actually means. My finger which is down actually stays parallel. Okay, when it moves. Okay, this is that skin stretch device, and this is the arm haptic device. So this rotation component they have added to make it parallel to the horizontal.
Yes, I got it.
It will not actually move both sides. Actually, it is like reaching forward only. Okay, in this direction only it is. That's why I use the example of elbow joint. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a minor point that has nothing much to do with the further things. So
yes,
I think I think
since they have added it, like avoiding that, because some people might have that question, like whether when we are moving something.
That's important, but what I'm telling is, I think we can just go ahead with it.
Yes. You don't need to give too much attention to it.
Yeah.
Okay, sir, I'll continue. So, that's what I hope that protocol is clear for all. Okay, now we'll go to the interpretation, what has happened. So this picture actually, graphical representation explains it actually all. That is like, you can see the cursor, right? I'm moving. So this is like, you can see here in this graph, 0 to 400, that is the number of trials they have done. And I have told you that the first one, 100 trials, they called it as baseline. And second, 200 repetition, they called it as adaptation. And the final 100, washout. This is the name they have given. So what has happened is like something called as position error. I've already mentioned that when they were doing the reaching activity in the initial 100, the force field or the perturbation, okay, is not given. Okay, so then what has happened is like there is movement is in straight line. What you see here when the sorry, so this is what the experiment says. So initial 100 trials, baseline, no perturbation was given, and middle 200 trials, that perturbation with or without skin stretch. And the final 100 trials, no perturbation and sudden withdrawal of the perturbation. So this is what actually has happened. So the people were able to move it in a straight line when no perturbation was given. So when they started giving the perturbation, their reaching actually started moving towards the perturbation. That is away from the straight line. And almost at the end, that is like almost at 300 repetitions were there, they started adapting. That is, they started bringing their movement with to the straight line, the reaching to the straight line. And once suddenly the forces where the perturbation was removed, you can see that this is moving away from the perturbation. Is this clear?
Yes.
So this is what it has happened. Like, so suddenly when the force is being removed, okay, they were using too much force and it was in the other direction. Okay. So this actually happens, like the example which I've already told, like when we are pushing the cart and suddenly like it comes, we have to do it in an opposite way. That when we are going down, we have to actually pull the cart. Okay, so we can compare this with that. See here, the below graph, you can see this is like here it's in the positive direction, and here you can, what you see is it goes in the negative direction. So this G0, G red and G blue actually indicates the like kind of forces. You can see here, G red is the force when they have used it opposite to the force field, and G100, that is the same direction of the force field.
That's the skin stretch, right?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So come to that result will come. So before that, about the grip force. So the peak ratio, that is like what happens to the grip. Okay, I've already told what is the load force and the grip force. Okay, load force is the force which the object exerts on us, and grip force is something which we exert on the object so that it will not slip away. So initially the grip force was more, okay, compared to the load force, and when like the experiment was repeated and the adaptation took place, okay, the ratio has come down. That means like our body, or like it has started understanding that what is the amount of force required for to counter the load force. So it has come down actually. That's what they say. Is that clear? Like, can I proceed? You see the results? Sir?
Yeah. Can you go to the previous slide, please?
This one, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So this predominantly was looking into the skin stretch, right? So they had compared the skin stretch, what happened during experiment, right? Can you hear my voice, Vipin?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, right. So,
Yes, sir. Yes.
so we had two things which were applied. One is the lateral force, that is force field adaptation. That was the primary thing. Over that, we applied a skin stretch in one direction, other direction. So this slide predominantly shows about that. Am I right, Vipin, sir?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yes.
Okay, right. And the next one, next slide, please. Can we move to the next slide?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay.
Right. So the next part was what happened to the grip force as we were applying a laterally generated force, right?
Yes, sir.
So, okay, right. So that was supposed to tell about the tactile sensation, and this is supposed to tell about the kinesthetic sensation.
Kinesthetic sense. Yes,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead.
See the result again, like, so in this picture, what we can interpret is that the skin stretch, when we like applied in the force field, like didn't affect, okay, on the movement path. That means like the force field was towards the right side. What you see here, the red and blue color, the skin stretch was in both direction. And we also have a yellow line, which there was no skin stretch. So all these participants actually started moving in the same way, okay, baseline, early adaptation, late adaptation, and early washout. That means the artificial stretch of the skin does not affect the. That's what we can make out from this one. I go to, I think that is clear, right? Like, can I proceed?
Yeah, please go ahead.
The second one, the group with a skin stretch in the opposite direction adapted the manipulation force. The group with the skin stretch in the opposite direction adapted the manipulation force more than the group with a skin stretch in the same direction as the applied force. So this, actually I can explain that, like, suppose we are moving in a bus, okay, and like holding the rod above, and we are holding that rod and we are traveling in a bus, and the bus is moving fast, and suddenly the bus comes a stop. We'll be moving, we'll be getting a skin stretch in the hand where we are holding, right? And it will be actually in the opposite direction. So this actually we can correlate with that, and why the people, the finding, okay, gives the result like that. Okay, and the third result is the group with the skin stretch in the same direction applied more grip force per amount to the load force. Okay, that's what in contrary what we have seen here, where the skin stretch was given the same direction as the applied force, they started applying more amount of force. This may be they haven't mentioned, or I didn't come across. Maybe things like it might slip out or something. They might have had that feeling. Sir, is that correct, sir? Maybe that's the reason they might have applied.
Yeah.
I feel that one on, because I that discussion part where I didn't come across on, I can't get a better explanation for that. Maybe that is the reason.
Yeah, sure.
And the conclusion is the effect of augmented tactile information. That is the tactor which we are using to stretch the skin. Okay, tactile information on manipulation and with force control, that we have studied. Okay, and tactile means the tactor and the skin stretch. It was found that adding a skin stretch in the same direction of the force field caused slower adaptation. Okay, and to the force field in terms of manipulation, force control. Kinesthetic, that is in skin stretch in the same direction, increase the modulation between the grip force and the load force. This is what we can conclude. And in contrast, that is the skin stretch in the opposite direction to the field improved the adaptation and did not affect the applied grip forces. So these results are important for the understanding of the effect of tactile information on motor adaptation, which can help in future developing of efficient haptic devices for assistance and rehabilitation. So to further conclude, okay, both tactile information and the kinesthetic information leads to improvement in the internal representation. Okay, both provide different types of adaptation to formation of the internal representation. Tactile, what we mean is stretch. Okay, tactile sensation provides the information to the internal representation about the movement path correction. Okay. And the kinesthetic, that is the muscle tension, provides information to the internal representation about the grip and manipulation. The result is feed-forward model and internal representation results in the errorless movement in the real time. Okay. And internal representation learns and predicts the correction to be done for errors. So, any doubts in this? So can I proceed?
Yeah, you can.
So the feed-forward models and their deficiencies. Okay, so the feed-forward can produce movement. Feedback is needed for error correction of the movements, and errors correction of the movements produced by such movement. This, if it involves proprioceptive feedback and loops, there will be delays and movement errors. The thing which I have told before, that the feedback loops, and there is like feedback is going to happen every time we are waiting for the feedback, that will actually delay our response, and we can make more errors. The solutions of feed-forward models to reduce errors in the model. Okay, and the feed-forward system should have an internal model that is capable of predicting the movements to external propagation. So this knowledge requires the knowledge of limb characteristics. So, can you like, explain this one? So, like, so,
yeah, Vipin.
So, like, can I continue?
Yeah,
Or
we'll
like you
just,
want to, sir,
stop here and let the participants ask their doubts, and then we will just continue. Is there any, what is there more to tell, Vipin, on this?
Sir?
Your voice is breaking in between. Yeah.
So like you want to add anything in between? That's what like I stopped.
Yeah, I think we can just ask others about whether they have understood this particular point, and then before going. Any questions in this particular part about the results or the conclusions? Okay, I'll do one thing. I'll just, Vipin, can I try just explaining this particular part?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, right. So predominantly what happens is we have a lot of sensory receptors, and we know that these sensory receptors are capable of giving feedback about whether we are moving in a right direction or wrong direction. So say, for example, we want to walk straight, and if we are moving in the lateral direction, then our eyes are going to give us, tell us that we are not moving in the same direction. Similarly, if we want to move a glass of water in one direction, the position sense will tell us whether we are moving in the right direction or not. This is how we have been thinking that the sensory system has been helping us. But one of the problem is, if the sensory information has to help us, then it needs to travel up. And as we all know, it travels through the afferent pathway, which consists of 3 neurons, which is first order, second order, and third order, and then it reaches the brain perceptual, the parietal cortex, and then it has to go to the planning centers, and then it has to go to the motor center. So it actually involves 4 or 5 different synapses, and so there will be a lot of delay in movement. So, primarily in this study, what we understood was the sensory information doesn't help in correction of the errors per se. Okay, so if say, for example, if you are going to that first slide of results, can you please show position errors? Results first slide. Yeah, right. So here we see here an artificial stretch of the skin does not affect the movement path, which means that the feedback from the periphery is not actually affecting the movement path. Okay, right. So it clearly tells us that even if you are giving or not giving, it's not going to affect the way in which we are moving. Right? So, and yesterday also we saw that a lot of discussion was going on that the sensory information, when they had when they had reduced the sensory information, the movement doesn't get affected. Right? So this is how we have been conceptualizing till now, how the sensory information is helping us in producing a right movement. But since this feedback, this information, if it goes, and it will have a delay, and by the time the correction comes back, we might have already made an error, right? But predominantly we see a smooth movement. So how is it possible that despite these delays, we are not losing anything and we are correctly correcting it, right? So from this study and this kind of study, what they are trying to tell is actually the brain creates internal representation of if I'm going to move, right? Then if an error comes, then how I need to correct it. Okay. So that information is already built into the system. How does it build into the system? Because as we have been learning over a lot of years, what happens is not only how a movement should be corrected is provided to the brain, but also the characteristic of the distal part of distal part. What I mean by distal part is the part which is moving, right? When I move my hand, I move a weight. I move a weight against gravity. Yeah. So like this, I should also understand the characteristic of my limb, right? And what are its capabilities, right? That I need to understand in order to correctly perform a movement. So if I have to correct an error, I need two things. One is information about what is the error, and also about what is my capability of correcting it. So instead of giving a moment-to-moment feedback to the brain, what they are telling is it forms an internal representation about the characteristic of the part of the body which produces a movement, right? When I say characteristic, it is to what forces, how it needs to respond. That information is built into the brain. So since it is already built into the brain, even if an error is going to come, the brain preactively knows that, okay, if any perturbation comes, I should not allow it, and I should go in the right direction, right? Or I should produce the right amount of force. So this particular information is already in the system, so it doesn't bring a delay into the error correction. So the movements which are being produced are produced in order not only to produce the movement, but also to accommodate for the error correction and perform the movement. So that is the new information which we seem to get from this study. So any questions about this? Jebastin, did you understand what is that internal representation is building it about?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. If you don't have a question, I think Vipin, you can please continue and
Done,
yeah.
sir. Done. Conclusion, like I've done, right?
Yeah, that's it, Vipin. Anything?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, I have one question.
Yeah.
So the internal representation is based upon the experienced forces, right?
Yeah.
So if the experienced forces is changing randomly in nature, what about the internal representation?
Which one?
If, for example, you told that internal representation will happen based upon the parameters which has been already experienced when force is entered or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if that is randomly changing,
yeah,
will it affect the internal representation?
What
that
is
feedforward
randomly
system
changing?
might that force or things. If it is same, then internal representation may reduce the error in doing the movement. That's what feed-forward system is going to do, right?
Yeah, the feed-forward system is going to do. So
if that perceived information is going to change randomly, it's not going to be the same. Then what happens to the internal representation?
You mean in a learning sense, or you mean in a movement sense, movement correction sense?
Learning sense, and movement correction sense also.
So in a movement correction,
so there will be a lot of errors in that particular moment.
Yeah, in a movement correction sense,
yes,
the system the internal representation is going to help it in overcoming the the responses to the random variation.
Okay.
And in the long-term sense, it is going to build a more powerful system if you're keeping on perturbing it. Right. So if a player is playing and you are giving him a leather ball, rubber ball, or other ball, he learns how to how much force he needs to give to in order to hit each ball, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what they are trying to tell, and not they are telling that it might not be in a very immediate way that the sensation may be helping us in correcting the errors which might be occurring. So that's what they are telling.
Okay.
So that's it.
So in a broad manner, that the sensory tactile informations can also be considered as one of the factors which is going to influence in reducing the errors as well as in the long-term learning that might be helpful in rehabilitation. So that's what the overall note point is, right, sir?
Yeah, in a short-term sense, we are really not sure.
Okay.
Okay, right? But definitely, say suddenly a push is happening and we need to respond to it, so it can respond to it. But whenever we walk, we see that we are not very incoordinated, but it's moving in a very smooth manner, right? So that is capable because of the building of that internal representation of the characteristics of the periphery. So something like when a baby is trying to come out of the womb, and when it's trying to walk immediately, the gravitational forces are overwhelming. So it has not built an internal representation about what will be the effect of gravity on this side pull or that side pull, how my body will be moving. But over a period of time, it learns to overcome the force of gravity. So although we are moving in a forward or upward or in a lateral direction, we seem to understand how the gravity might be influencing our body parts. So that's what they are trying to tell.
Characteristics means parameters, right?
No, the characteristics means if a force is going to influence me, right? Then how would my body be moving, right? So that requires information both about the external force as well as the ability of my body to not move to that, right?
Okay.
Right. So that's what I mean by characteristic. It's not a parameter.
Okay.
Sir, so this study can also help us in basically this study translates to the approaches, different approaches that uses sensation to treat error-based problems. So can we use this as the base of understanding how that thing doesn't work or works?
Can you give me, can you be more specific on one example for which approach you are telling, or any two approaches which you are contrasting? Can you just tell?
Sir, like for example, if we take roots and all, it's more of tactile and sensation-based approach. And on the contrary, we have functional training and task-oriented training.
Yeah. So in a roots approach, the sensation has been used in a very, very limited sense. They are telling that you give a stimulus and you get a response immediately, right? So they are expecting an immediate response. They are not telling anything about the internal representation. They're telling I give a stimulus and it will change. So that's a wrong way of conceptualizing how the sensation might influence a movement. But when you talk in terms of the functional approach, here we are trying to make the person move in different types of environment when we are changing, right? Slowly the brain is learning over a period of time how to react and respond to it. So it comes out. So, am I making the point of difference between the two?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's so that's why I think even sensory ataxia, although we are looking into the movement, we might not be we might not be getting a perfect movement when we are walking. So we might not fall. At the same time, we might not be also walking normally. Any further?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah. Yes.
Sir, the schema and this internal representation are Same thing, sir.
No, we may not be able to think of it like that, right? Because when we tell a schema, it's about the motor schema, all right, and about the recall schema. Sorry, recall and recognition schema. So one is responsible for producing the movement. The other one is responsible for giving a feedback about that. So there is a big difference between what's the schema and what they are telling as an internal representation. There might be points of overlap, but still they are not the same. And I think that might be a question which we may need to ask during Elena Niski's presentation also, because we can make it more clear at that point of time. So please don't forget about this to ask, right, what is the difference between the schema and the internal representation. If Elena Niski is presenting this paper, hopefully we'll see that. Yeah. Okay. I think there are no further questions. So, yeah. Okay. So I have a small one, some 5 minutes or 10 minutes to speak on referent model, because tomorrow he's going to speak like that, and so we need slight understanding about it. So I'll just talk about it. But before that, I wanted to clarify 2 points. One is I'm really thankful to Vipin for making this presentation so understandable and the experiment so clear. Right. So thank you, Vipin, so much for putting in a lot of effort in order to do it. Right. I know.
No mention, sir. No mention, sir.
You told me that you also tried presenting to your students and then looking at that.
Yeah. Actually, so, whether they understood something or not, then I don't know whether out of fear or anything, I don't know. They didn't ask much questions. That is again one problem I had.
Okay, so but that's
thank you,
fine.
sir.
So it was very crisp and clear. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And also, I hope everyone yesterday would have, those who have attended a previous presentation of Jebastin, I think everyone would have been very, very clear about what they were speaking yesterday. Otherwise, it would have been tough, right? And then, so I also take this opportunity to thank Jebastin and also the first day presenters, both Princey, Ria, and Riddhi, for the development of locomotion part of it. Even that, of course, the biomechanics part of was not something expected, but the second portion of the neural control of development, that was understandable because you guys have made it. So, so I'd like to really thank everyone for having taken the time, effort, and explaining and being patient and listening it. Still, I know that many of us would not be very clear with what they have told. All right, but eventually the videos are available. We can rehear that. We can also discuss at any point of time. And any point of time when you have a doubt, you can always ask. And more importantly, we are introduced to a set of experimenters who do that. So it's also possible that you have an opportunity to directly ask. Only thing is, I don't want any hesitation. All right, so please start asking whatever doubt which comes to your mind. Even if you're not able to understand, you please ask them, why did you do this? How did you do this? These kind of questions can help us. And with my experience, I'm telling, unless and until we interact with people and we try to understand what they are speaking, it is always a half knowledge. What we think as right is right. What we think as understandable is not understandable, is only not understandable. So please see to that we are trying to interact more in the further presentations. Okay, right? And I know some of us would also sleep off. So that is, we cannot help it, but that's okay. All right. So, yeah. So any feedbacks about from the student side predominantly about the motor control summer school? Is there anything which you seem as okay? And also from Sheikh sir's team also. I should ask some people. Riddhi, Princey, can you just...
Sir, what I personally feel it was like it was more of experimental and scientific kind of discussion. I was not expecting more of that, but it was actually it was only that. So it was initially it was difficult to go what they are telling and what it is actually, and they are more into specifically into their experiment and their study which they have done. So whatever questions or whatever doubts we ask, also they will be more specific on their study, and they'll be giving answers on that. So that is what I feel.
Okay, right. So that is called as real science. And in physiotherapy classes, whatever is happening is not the real science. Okay, that's something which we need to get into, because we are more used to a teacher coming and explaining as how things are rather than telling about one particular experiment, right? So but this is how the information is built, and this is how it is. All right, so I'm happy that you were able to perceive a big difference between how things are going on here and how things are going on there, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
yes, sir.
Yeah,
I also feel the same. Actually, and we realize we were able to understand more, like how they did. Actually, we read and we discussed, but how they felt and how it was that we were able to identify, like differentiate also, sir.
Yeah, right. So that's fine. It's not necessary that we understand everything, but I think that's fine about it.
Yes.
And yeah, Naveen, any inputs from your side? Because I think we are second-time listeners, I hope.
Yes, sir. Compared to last time, this time, I think I can understand some sort of ABCD.
Okay, right. So that was nice.
Hello?
Thank you. Yeah, Naveen. Yeah, so...
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you're audible.
So this time, somewhat these discussions are really very much helping in just grasping some information from what they are trying to tell. And hope if this discussions continues, we can be more expressive in the next summer schools if they are conducting online.
Yeah, right. So that's there, right? And to first timers, you are listening to second timers. So if you don't understand, don't get affected, right? Because last time we were all sitting, we were not able to grasp many of those things. And as Sheikh sir rightly told, there's going to be tomorrow Anatol's presentation. It's going to be very, very tough to understand because of his pronunciation. So I would suggest one particular thing, right? Today, like how force field adaptation we have learned. So tomorrow, please listen to Anatol's last year presentation so that you will understand his linguistic sounds which are coming out. That will make it I think that might make it slightly easier for you to grasp it. So at least some 15 minutes before they are starting, you can just listen to Louis' channel if you go on. In that last year motor control summer school 2020, if you just search, Anatol's presentation is there. So if you listen to him, maybe you'll be able to understand. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really hard.
And last time his mic was also not that much audible, sir. His voice was very mild.
His voice is very feeble.
Very feeble, yeah. This time also he is sitting somewhat distant from the computer and he is speaking very low tone.
Yeah, maybe we can just tell them that to speak a bit louder. We are not able to hear clearly.
Last time it has been like 15-20 minutes. They are trying to sort it out. Mindy ma'am was doing something.
Yeah. So that's how it is. So so I'll just talk very, very briefly about the referent configuration. We know up until equilibrium point. So in equilibrium point, we saw that the brain sets lambda And this lambda, where it is, depending on that, the movement will happen, right? So that's what we saw in the last discussion about equilibrium point model, all right? So I hope you remember about that. And so what is a referent control model or a referent configuration? Is basically, say for example, I'm standing here, right? I'm in this position. Right? So what I tell is the brain, when it comes to the multi-joint control or the whole body control, what it tells that the brain, when it wants to move, it first creates a referent location in the environment. So say for example, consider this as my position, right? And I want to move to this position. Okay, right? From this position, I want to move to this position. So this becomes my referent position, right? So the brain tells I need to move to that particular point. Okay, so that's called as the referent location. Okay, and they say that once that is set, the next one is the brain tells about referent configuration of the body. What is a configuration is how these structures are interconnected and what is the joint configuration. Say, for example, in this, the joint is all in an extension configuration, right? In this, the joint is all in a partial flexion configuration. In this, the joint is all in a complete flexion configuration. So this is what is a configuration. Okay, right? Joint configuration. So if I want to move from here to here, the brain, they tell that the brain totally tells to the next lower level that the joint configurations of all the three joints should move from here to here. Okay, right? So the first one is referent location, and then the second one is, in order to go to that position, the referent configuration, right? What is the position it tells? Now, once it tells the referent configuration, right? Now, what happens is, in the first state, we are standing in one place, right? Now, this is the position of equilibrium point, right? Or the equilibrium position. So in equilibrium position, last time we saw that there is all the muscles are at rest, right? So now when the brain tells that this is not the equilibrium position, there is a referent position to which you need to go, automatically this position, what happens is, in this position, the muscle activity will all start increasing and it will come to a rest only when we reach the next referent position. Okay, right? So like how in an equilibrium point model, we saw that from the lambda is shifted from one position to other position. So automatically the movement will happen and it will come to a rest only in the other position. The same thing, there are three lambdas which are given for this whole part, right? So one controls this particular, the other one controls this, the other one controls this, right? So together it gives control. That's the second level. And finally, there is a referent location which is there we need to go. So our movement will not stop unless and until we reach over that particular point. Okay, right? So I'd like to share my screen and I'll just show you one particular thing. All right. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Right. So tomorrow he might be talking in terms of Q and R. So we should be clear, right? Now Q is the original position of this person. You can see here, right? And R is the referent position, which the brain tells. And once it tells, now in this Q, all the muscles are at rest, right? In one position. So only when it reaches to that referent position, then what will happen is the muscles will come to rest. Okay, right? So now once the referent configuration is given to the body, what happens is all the muscles which are here, right, which are connecting the individual joints, they should, what will happen is, how to tell that, giving an example. Say, for example, you're connecting 2 or 3 sticks, right, one after the other, right, with rubber bands. Okay, right? So if by multiple rubber bands you are connecting, and if you leave them to rest, it will be in one position, correct? Now, if you are going to change the configuration of the 3 sticks, 1, 2, 3, in a very different position, then what you will see that some of the rubber bands are stretched from its position and some of the rubber bands will be shortened. All right? Yeah. So they will move on to the original resting position, right? So what it tells is the brain sets what is the resting position, and that's the referent configuration, right? And in this way, it's possible for them to move from one place to the other place and come to an equilibrium position in that particular point. Okay, right? So this is the picture. So what happens is there are 3 levels. So you can see that the first one is you can see the picture down here. The person is standing in one place. This is the current location Q of the body. And RF is the referent location. The red one is the referent location, right? So whenever a movement is required, what happens is you can now see in this particular part A, there is a shift in referent body location, all right? And that stimulates a set of neurons which shifts the referent configuration of the body, right? That is multi-joint control. And the total multi-joint control, what it needs to be given is given by individual lambdas, and that shifts the threshold muscle lengths. So we saw what is the threshold muscle length in the previous class. That's the lambda shift, right? So this is what is meant by a referent control of the body in environment. Okay. So how it is done and things like that are further things for us to understand. But basically, if you have understood equilibrium point, and if you have understood the EP model of how a muscle and joint is controlled, I think after that it is just a translation of it. Okay, right? So say for example, if I have to explain with the pendulum model, just explain. Yeah, you can see me, right? So if a pendulum is there, right? So there is a rope and there is a weight, which is a thing that the nail is a bob or a weight which is there, right? Here. Now, in whichever position I move, right, it will come to a settlement in this particular position. Yeah, right. So previously we used to think that if at all a movement is required, what we do is we just push this bob and then the movement is occurring to the other position. But if it is going to the other position, that is not its stable position, so it will tend to come back, right? So according to the previous model, whenever we were trying to move, we should be coming back to the original position and we may not be moving. And this was told as a posture movement problem, okay, right? So now what they are telling is, instead of moving this bob, what they are doing is the place where the bob is connected up, right? So if I move it to another position, say for example, this particular point, my knuckle is there, right? If I move my knuckle, that's the top end where it is attaching. If I move it to the other position, then what will happen is this position will not be a resting position for it, right? So if I'm going here, then what will happen is my nail, right, that's a bob, that will not be able to rest in this position, but it has to find a new equilibrium position, right? So wherever I'm moving the top edge. So they are telling that like that, the brain is controlling and it is just shifting. And so we are moving from one equilibrium position to other equilibrium position and we are resting. So that's what is meant by referent model of control and referent configuration hypothesis. Okay. So I hope you had a bit of clarification about some of the terminologies. Okay. If any questions, you can ask me. Otherwise, we can just wind up for the day.
So you mentioned something called as posture movement problem. Can you just give a gist about that?
Yeah, posture movement problem. Yeah. Now, what's a posture movement problem is, say, for example, I'm going to maintain a particular posture, right? Say standing posture or a sitting posture, right? Now, what happens is my brain is going to give a command to my limbs when I'm standing, right? It's going to give a command to my limb that you should not move, right? So when it gives a command to me like that, right, if any perturbation is happening, I am not moving, I try to resist it. So whenever a small movement is going to happen, I'm going to resist that, right? Now, the question is, when the brain has given a command, don't move, resist any change in posture, right? Now, if the brain is giving a command, move, right? Clear? Then the command will be coming at the same time, right? So already there is a command which is there down, which is preventing the movement. Now another command is going to come, allow the movement, right? So if this command is going to come, then the posture command, that is resist the movement, should be taken out, right? Now when we take out that, what will happen is suddenly you're having a command of don't move, right? And then you're getting a command of move, right? Both of it are coming at the same time. So how is it possible that a movement command can overcome the don't move command, right? And if at all it is permitting it, right, then this command has to stop. If it stops, then what happens is the posture will not be maintained, we will fall. And then we will have to get back, right? So there, that should be stopped, and then the next command should come. But between these two times, we might ideally, it might happen that our postural control is lost and we will fall. But whenever we see that we are moving from one position to other position, we don't see a abnormal movement in between, but we see a smooth transition, right? So if I'm sitting and if I have to stand, right? Yeah, so my sitting posture tells me don't move from this. So when I'm sitting, if anyone is pushing, I'm still maintaining that. So that is called as a posture movement problem in motor control. And yeah. So do you get it, Javeston, what I mean by that?
Yes, sir, clearly.
Okay.
So I don't know if this question is related or like how. So you said that the brain creates a referent location in talking about the equilibrium point of. So how does it like create exactly, like how? What is the drive of that creation? Like our motive, or I want to do that kind of thing, or is there any background?
There is a gap between these two. Actually, there are 2 points which we need to fill in. One is the motivation which we are telling, right? Now that is not what is being told here, right? And this particular question in the current equilibrium point model and referent control model, they have just told the down part of it. That is, once you decide that the movement has to happen, then how can the movement happen? That is what the referent control hypothesis and the equilibrium point model of individual joint control and the muscle length control is working, right? Last presentation, you were not there. So I think I'll send the video. You can just listen to the last 1 or 2 presentation we had discussed in detail about this particular, right? Now, 2 things should happen. One is the intent should tell you to go from one place to the other place, right? So that's a problem without a motor program, okay, right? But to replace that, there is a model called as ecological model, which is given by Gibson. So we will eventually try to do a reading of Gibson at one point of time, right? And also there is an alternate model to Gibson's, which actually it's not an alternate model, is the dynamic field theory. Okay, last time Naveen sir and Ridhima ma'am has taken. So it's called as a dynamic field theory, right? These 2 theories combined might give us the answer as to how the referent location is being defined, right? And it is possible that it is being defined. without any need for a motor program or a command. So I think we may need to go for a slightly deeper discussion of it in order to understand that. Because if you are understanding ecological model, then there are some building blocks, 1, 2, 3, we need to understand. Then we understand how, then only we'll be able to understand it clearly. Similarly, dynamic field theory, we need to understand certain basics in order to tell what is possible, what is not possible. So the question of how the referent location is defined, how the lambda is defined, how the end position is defined, right, is a slightly higher order topic on movement, right? And here per se, we are looking into the lower order, how the brain is controlling the movement. That's what we are looking at. Clear?
Yes.
Okay, so it requires some more time. All right, we need to be patient a little bit more in order to discuss about it, and then come. I don't want to just tell you, okay, this is how it's controlling, right? Because we also need to understand, we are doing science, so we need to understand why we are telling it like this and why not in other way. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, right. So if that's fine, we will just wind up for the day. Thank you again for the speaker for making the time between 8:30 to 9:30 very pleasant and not difficult for us and confusing us. Thank you. And also for all the listeners who are coming with a lot of hope that we would one day be able to do something with this information. So thank you for the hope. We'll meet again tomorrow. And today, I think we can sleep early. So tomorrow, we'll have to wake. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.